What if a conflict just 90 miles away could shake Jamaica's economy overnight? That's exactly the risk building right now between Cuba and the United States. Welcome to Business Shakers, where we break down the stories shaking the business world, right here in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. If you want to understand what's really happening in the economy, how it affects your money, and where the opportunities are, make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. Let's get into today's Business Shaker. Tensions between Cuba and the United States have taken a sharp turn in 2026. And while this may seem like distant geopolitics, the reality is much closer to home, especially for Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. So what exactly happened? At the start of 2026, the United States ramped up pressure on Cuba in a major way. New sanctions and trade restrictions were introduced, targeting Cuba's already fragile economy. One of the biggest blows came from tightening oil supply routes, particularly from Venezuela. That move triggered a serious energy crisis in Cuba, leading to widespread power outages, fuel shortages, and a struggling economy. At the same time, tensions escalated politically. Strong statements from U.S. leadership raised concerns about possible intervention, and there was even a reported violent maritime incident involving gunfire near Cuban waters. While both countries are still holding discussions behind the scenes, the overall situation remains unstable. Now here's the real question. Why does this matter for Jamaica? Jamaica's economy is deeply connected to regional stability. When a major neighbor like Cuba enters crisis, the effects don't stay contained. One of the first areas of impact is energy and fuel prices. If Cuba struggles to secure oil and global tensions rise, it can disrupt regional supply chains. That can lead to higher fuel costs across the Caribbean, including Jamaica, affecting transportation, electricity, and ultimately the cost of doing business. Then there's tourism. The Caribbean operates as a shared tourism zone in many ways. Instability in one country can influence how the entire region is perceived. If tensions escalate or military activity becomes a real possibility, travelers may view the region as risky. That could reduce visitor arrivals, not just to Cuba, but to Jamaica as well. Trade is another factor. Jamaica relies on shipping routes that pass through or near Cuban waters. Any disruption, whether from conflict, sanctions, or increased military presence, can slow down imports and exports. That means delays, higher shipping costs, and pressure on businesses that depend on steady supply chains. But the biggest concern is what happens if things escalate into military action. A military conflict near Cuba would have immediate economic consequences for Jamaica. Shipping lanes could become restricted or heavily monitored, increasing costs and delays. Insurance premiums for cargo and travel could rise sharply. Investors may become cautious, pulling back from Caribbean markets due to uncertainty. There's also the issue of migration. Economic collapse or conflict in Cuba could lead to increased movement of people across the region, placing pressure on neighboring countries, including Jamaica, both socially and economically. For businesses and entrepreneurs, this is a moment to pay attention. Rising fuel costs, supply chain disruptions, and shifts in tourism demand could all impact profitability. Companies that rely heavily on imports may need to rethink sourcing strategies. Tourism-based businesses may need to adjust marketing to reassure travelers. So, what's the bigger insight here? The Caribbean is more interconnected than many people realize. What happens in Cuba doesn't stay in Cuba. This situation highlights a broader trend. Geopolitical tensions are becoming a real economic risk for small island economies like Jamaica. The key takeaway? Stability is one of the Caribbean's greatest economic assets. And right now, that stability is being tested.